At lunch day before yesterday, somebody came up with the notion that women make half as much as men, and I just said that was bullshit because it's just leftist bullshit. And that's what it is. And but the reason you know that that's the case is because if women made half as much as men for the same job, all the men would get fired. Right? As simple as that. Right? If there's some sort of conspiracy or some sort of non-conspiracy, the employer knows that he's getting twice the value for his money out of the woman. He's going to fire all the men. And but of course that's not the case, so that's why the men don't get fired. This woman had been employed in town here, and she didn't get paid very much. And then she just sort of threw out that cliche, that nonsensical cliche that women get less than men. They don't for the same job. They get probably exactly the same. And what does it mean to say the same job? It means that you're doing the same amount, you're providing the same amount of value for the employer. That's what it means. It doesn't mean that you're in the same job category. That's stupid. Who cares about that, right? I'm a carpenter. Oh yeah? They should all be paid the same because they're all called carpenters. So this is the kind of brainwashing that's been going on for the last 100 years or so. And there's always been some brainwashing because somebody in power wants to maintain power. For instance, minimum wage was started by the labor unions in the 1930s to keep blacks from taking away government contracts because they were willing to work for less money. So they put a minimum wage in there, and the black contractors couldn't get the jobs anymore because the labor unions wanted to keep out black competition. So, I mean, there's two different ways that you know that leftist economic propositions are BS. One is you can do experimental research. You can isolate different factors, and you find out what causes differences in wages. And you find out it has nothing to do with some kind of conspiracy or some kind of discrimination. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with other things, such as that women, they make less because they don't work as much. And if you don't work as much, you're not worth as much. Simple as that. The more you work, the more you're worth because you have more experience and you're more involved in this particular industry. You have more particular knowledge, so you become more valuable. And because women have certain biological instincts that keep them from working as much. And, women ought not to be working as much. They ought to be at home. But that was destroyed by basically the Federal Reserve and coming off the gold standard in '71. Because Johnson and Kennedy, they spent so much money that we had to come off the gold standard because our gold reserves were getting drained by foreign central banks. So they defaulted on their obligation to pay in gold, which is what the dollar used to be, from 46 to 71. From 33 to 46, I'm not sure if there are any obligations, but there certainly weren't to them citizens, just to the, if there were, they were just to foreign central banks. So anyway, the whole thing can be done, you can do it logically. as I said, if wages were actually lower for women for the same work, then all the men would get fired. That tells you right away it's a lot of nonsense. Because they would get fired. If you're an employer, you say, well, hell, I'm going to employ women because I like women. No, you would employ women because you can somehow get the women to do the same amount of work for half the cost, and you'd make a lot more money, wouldn't you? A lot more money. But it's BS. It isn't the situation at all. And the other reason you can tell is because the empirical research goes to show that there are a number of reasons why women make less. Not for the same job, not for the same qualifications, but they make less for, they make less because women don't do what it takes by their natures to make the more high-paying jobs. For one thing, they work in social sciences more, in the social fields more, and less in the industrial and business fields, or technical fields, which all pay higher money. And the other thing is they don't work as much, and that reduces your wages. So there's a lot of things that reduce your wages, and women are susceptible to some of those things, but by their very natures. And it just goes hand in hand with the fact that women shouldn't be at work so much. They should be at home more. And that's what would make children happier, and make us stronger. So it's a socialist, what they call it, it's a socialist babble. That's not the word. I don't want the word babble, but it's like a jackal. It's like jackals screaming. That's what it is. And it's all a lot of nonsense. That Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is one of these nonsense promoters. These nutcases, really, that a lot of nutcases in the country vote for. But you can't, she's just a kook. She has no idea how evil central banking is and how evil central planning is, because central banking is a form of central planning. Not to mention it lends itself to other types of central planning. We used to have a very strong rail system in America, but after World War II, the government disincentivized railroads and incentivized roads and paid for roads. So the government screwed it up, and they're going to screw up whatever they try, because it isn't concepts it isn't intellect that creates a society. It's individuals voluntarily interacting that creates a society. Even Jordan Peterson doesn't get, even though he's anti-collectivist, he doesn't get that the inequality that's inherent in society, in hierarchical society, which is inherent in society, it's inherent. You have to have hierarchies in order to have existence. That those inequalities in a free society would be ameliorated. They would be the fact of being on the outs as a less dominant male, for instance, would be less of a problem in a free society, because a free society would be far more complex, have far more opportunities, and those people who are on the outs would have an ability to jump into, they would have the ability to find a niche for themselves, which gave them self-esteem, which is what Jordan is basically talking about. He's not talking about starvation, he's talking about self-esteem. So there's these niches. Well, you take, for instance, the people in this town who are not business people, but are just working people. These people have a lot of self-esteem. I mean, obviously they have problems, but they can do things. All these people around here can do things. They can do things with their hands. There may be other sorts of skills that they have besides manual skills. And that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. And that's even without a free society. We do not have a free market. We do not have what some people call capitalism. I don't like the term capitalism because capital is always there. What I'm talking about is free society, in which capital is accumulated in the most voluntary and therefore useful way. Because only the individual is competent to make decisions for herself. No one can make a decision with any competence for anybody else, not even a mentally retarded person. If you've ever been around a mentally retarded person and you told him what to do, you know he or she would resent the hell out of you. And that principle of not telling anybody what to do is what constructs society. It isn't just somebody in charge. It's that everybody who is in charge is there because people voluntarily, I don't want to use the word submit, but they do. They become part of that leadership circle. And if you had a free society, you would have so much of that, and so much interactivity, and so much more pride, and so much more upliftment of everyone in society, as we've seen in the past in free societies, such as late 19th century America. Tremendous altruism took place. And it's real altruism. It's not the fake altruism of forcing people to get into a bureaucratic system based on political principles or on special interest and interacting with vested interests. Their interests taking over actually what happens. Everything that we've done in terms of redistribution of wealth is to sustain vested interests and it doesn't have the construction that comes from voluntarism, that constructs. The only source of positivity is voluntarism, is self-ownership. Being in an involuntary situation is always detrimental, which is why government is a stupid idea. It's ignorance. So nothing can be done better with coercion than without coercion, unless you're trying to destroy society. And especially if you're, and specifically I started out talking about the stupidity that women in a free market would get paid less for the same job. Utter stupidity.